Please, ladies and gentlemen, can you take your seat? We are about to start. Okay, I'll start. Good afternoon, distinguished delegates. I would like to call the meeting to order. I invite delegates to take their seats. Distinguished delegates, during the past days, we have seen good progress on the work of the different contact groups under this agenda item. We would like to commend delegates and the co-facilitators for your effort and dedication. I note that contact groups 2 and 3 have at least completed the first round of discussion, and contact group 1 is on track of finishing the first round of discussions tonight. We are convening this plenary today primarily to take stock of the progress of our work under agenda item 4 on the preparation of an international legally binding instrument on plastic pollution, including in the marine environment. Before I take up agenda item 4, I would like to revisit the matter of the election of officers that I raised during our plenary on Monday. As you will recall, during this plenary, I took note of the resignation of Mr. Kaupo Jaima of Estonia as Vice Chair of the Eastern European States to the INC Bureau. I had further invited the group of Eastern European states to nominate a candidate for the one vacant seat for the region and to communicate to me the information on the nomination by today. I would like to give the floor to the representative of the group of Eastern European states to provide us with an update on this matter. I give the floor to the Vice Chair from Georgia. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Upon invitation of the Chair, the Eastern European State Group convened. On Monday, we received a letter from the government of Estonia nominating Mr. Harry Liiv. The group agreed to have silent procedure regarding the replacement of Vice Chair from Estonia, and the deadline was Wednesday, 15 November evening. I'm delighted to inform you that there was no objection from the countries of our region. Please inform the committee that the group of Eastern European states will put forward the nomination of Mr. Harry Liiv of Estonia for the election as Vice Chair when you take this agenda item on Sunday. Thank you.
I thank the Vice Chair from Georgia for this update. I would like to remind delegates that we will take up agenda item 2 on the election of officers on Sunday, 19 November. to address the matters of the change of the chair as well as the election of the vice chair from the region of Eastern European states. I would now like to give the floor to the co-facilitators of each of the contact groups to provide us with a short report on the progress of their work. Let us start with a short report back from the co-facilitators of Contact Group 1, Ms. Gwen Cisior of Palau and Mr. Axel Borschmann of Germany. Ms. Cisior and Mr. Borschmann, you have the floor from the seat of Palau.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the opportunity to address the plenary and provide a stocktake of the work of Contact Group 1. Contact Group 1 was asked to review the objective provision in Part 1 and Part 2 of the Annex to Zero draft. The group was mandated to consider the zero drafts and inputs from members to be incorporated in a revised version of the zero draft, and input on the possible relevant intersessional work, if any, to be reported to the plenary today and communicated to Contact Group 3 for further elaboration. Contact Group 1 has held 4 meetings from 7 p.m. to 10 p.m. on Tuesday, and from 3 to 6 p.m., and again from 7 to 10 p.m. on Wednesday, and 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. today, Thursday. On behalf of my co-facilitator and the supporting secretariat team, we would like to sincerely thank delegates for their cooperative and constructive spirit during our contact group discussions. We have had the opportunity to hear views from members, including where there were support for existing provisions and/or options of the zero draft, where members would like to see amendments to or removal of provisions and/or options in the zero draft text, and to hear the rationale for alternative or additional text proposal subsequently sent to the Secretariat. We also had the opportunity to hear very constructive interventions by some observers. The views shared have helped all of us to better understand the perspectives and priorities we bring to this negotiating process. With this, I'd like to give the floor to my esteemed co-facilitator to report on the work we've done and on the intersessional work identified so far in our group.
Thank you so much, Gwen, and also from my side, many thanks to the members and observers of this committee. I admire your endurance and perseverance we have shown so far, and hopefully we'll go through this all again with you. It is a pleasure. So Contact Group 1 covered a wide range of issues during our meetings, and that was including objective, primary plastic polymers, chemicals and polymers of concern, problematic and avoidable plastics, including short-lived and single-use plastic products, and intentionally added microplastics. Product design, composition and performance, non-plastic substitutes, extended producer responsibility, emissions, and releases of plastic throughout its life cycle, waste management, trade in listed chemicals, polymers and products, and in plastic waste. We have already also opened existing plastic pollution, just transition, transparency, tracking, monitoring, and labeling, but have not yet concluded these discussions. So also what I'm going to present now on the intersessional work is not an exhaustive list, but is also reflecting what we have heard so far, but there may be other items to be added to this list. So during the course of these discussions, we had a number of topics for intersessional work that were raised by the members. These topics were in no particular order: the common targets and global targets for managing and/or reducing the global production and supply of primary plastic polymers, including baselines of polymers, levels of sustainable consumption, and impacts on GDP. Criteria for identifying chemicals and polymers of concern. Criteria for problematic and avoidable plastic products, short-lived and single-use plastic products, and impacts of bans thereof. Regarding those also works and lists and annexes what was referred to. There was a request for intersessional work on exemptions, as well as minimum sustainable design and performance criteria and standards, including circularity. We heard calls for assessment of the health and the environmental impacts of micro and nanoplastics, as well as sources and pathways of emission and releases, as well as methodologies for monitoring existing plastic pollution. We heard calls for focus the intersessional work on minimum reduction, reuse and refill and repair targets, as well as the call for sectoral approaches to make more specific provisions on those sectors. We heard as well calls on the life cycle management of EPR, which also had reference, but not only, modalities for EPR, while we heard calls as well on EPR and intersessional work to be conducted on that as well. We had discussions for the need to assess financial needs to meet the provisions contained in the future treaty, as well as on trade issues. There were some calls for definitions already, also this is not an exhaustive list, e.g. for primary plastic polymers, as well as fossil-based chemicals and polymers of concern, as well as alternative plastic products, and such techniques like open dumping. We heard calls to define just transition, as well as such terms like producer. The Secretariat has been uploading the submissions received from members. We received 182 submissions that are related to Part 1 and 2 of the annex of the Zero Draft by 10 a.m. this morning. We look forward to continue our discussions and further reflect upon and discussing the expanded draft text with all members in the future meetings of Contact Group 1, and the colleagues will surely update you on the further procedure. I thank you, Chair, and hand back to you.
I thank the co-facilitators of Group Number 1, Ms. Cisior and Mr. Borschmann, for your report and your valuable work. We will now hear a short progress report from the co-facilitators of Contact Group 2, Ms. Kate Lynch of Australia and Mr. Oliver Boishy of Ghana. Ms. Lynch and Ms. Boishy, you have the floor from the seat of Australia.
Thank you, Chair, for the opportunity to address the plenary and provide a stocktake of the work of Contact Group 2. As you will recall, Contact Group 2 was asked to review Part 3 and Part 4 of the annex to the Zero Draft. The group was mandated to consider the Zero Draft and inputs from members to be incorporated in a revised version of the Zero Draft, and inputs on the possible relevant intersessional work, if any, to be reported to the plenary today and communicated to Contact Group 3 for further elaboration. Contact Group 2 has held 3 meetings from 3 p.m. to 6 p.m. on Tuesday, and on Wednesday from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. and again from 3 p.m. to 6 p.m. As indicated by our colleagues in Contact Group 1, we wish to sincerely thank all delegates for the collaborative and constructive discussions in Contact Group 2. Sharing views and listening to the various priorities and perspectives has been helpful for us all. We have had the opportunity to hear views from members, including where there was support for the existing provisions of the Zero Draft, where members would like to see amendments to or removal of provisions in the Zero Draft, and to hear the rationale for alternative or additional text proposals that the delegation intended to make. During the course of our first round of discussions, Contact Group 2 covered a wide range of issues. We spoke about the important issues of financing, capacity building, technical assistance and technology transfer, national plans, implementation and compliance, reporting on progress, periodic assessment and monitoring of the progress of implementation of the instrument, and effectiveness evaluation, as well as international cooperation, information exchange, awareness raising, education and research, and stakeholder engagement. During the course of these discussions, a number of topics for intersessional work were raised by members. We will briefly cover a summary of those items now. In relation to financing, there was a suggestion that an overview of the types of activities that may need to be supported financially to effectively implement the instrument be developed. So there were suggestions that this could include activities required to directly implement obligations, as well as to build capacity and capability. There was also a suggestion to undertake intersessional work on an analysis, including potentially mapping existing financial flows which support or have the potential to support the types of activities identified in my previous intersessional work item. There were suggestions that this analysis and mapping of finance flows consider finance flows across the plastics life cycle and across geographies, including potentially at national and regional level. It was also suggested that a review of existing finance provided to address plastic pollution could be useful to determine what was effective. The third area identified for potential intersessional work by Contact Group 2 in relation to finance was analysis of different options for a financial mechanism. So during our group's discussions, there were suggestions that this work could consider modalities currently available in existing multilateral environmental agreements or elsewhere and their effectiveness. The fourth area was the potential to develop further information on innovative financing. There were suggestions that this work could include an overview of existing sources and flows of innovative financing and strategies to enhance mobilisation of finance from the private sector. It was also suggested that there be further discussion on Part 3, Item 1, Paragraph 9, which relates to the plastic pollution fee, and Paragraph 10, which relates to measures to decrease or increase financial flows to certain projects. In relation to capacity building, technical assistance and technology transfer, there was a suggestion during our contact group for intersessional work to develop a plan for capacity building that would support implementation of the instrument. This work should, it was suggested, identify focus areas for capacity building, identify needs of both member states and stakeholders, and propose how these would be addressed. In relation to national plans, there was a suggestion for intersessional work to develop guidance on the format of national plans. The discussion during Contact Group 2 identified that this may be best left until after the binding obligations in the instrument are finalised, and also a suggestion that guidance could potentially be issued by the governing body. Secondly, to develop potentially a list of relevant elements, including minimum standards or common provisions, for example, to include in national plans. And again, a suggestion that that be implemented by, or decision taken by the governing body. There was also a suggestion for intersessional work to guide the review and updating of national plans. And finally, a suggestion for intersessional work relating to the standardised methods for data collection and reporting relating to plastics, including potentially in relation to greenhouse emissions also throughout the plastics life cycle. There was also a suggestion that further intersessional work, it may be useful to use further intersessional work to explore how progression could be demonstrated as in relation to subsequent national plans, as proposed in Part 4, Item 1, Paragraph 6. In terms of implementation and compliance, the contact group suggested that there may be, or a suggestion was raised during the contact group's discussion, for intersessional work to progress work on the establishment of a compliance committee as a subsidiary body of the governing body. Many members during our discussion suggested that such a committee be representative of regional groups. Others called for expert membership or a combination of legal and technical expertise. There were differing views about timing, with many members indicating it was too early to determine the modality of a compliance entity, and the terms of reference should be determined by a governing body. Others were keen to see a compliance entity established in the treaty or in the instrument to avoid lengthy delays in its establishment. In relation to reporting, there were also some suggestions for intersessional work, including to determine the format of reporting required under the instrument, to consider how any future reporting would be integrated with any future national action plans, and to identify relevant existing reporting obligations under other multilateral environmental agreements and other international mechanisms, including provision of reporting to global databases, for example, to avoid duplication of effort. We will convey in a written form these suggestions in more detail and look forward to passing those to Contact Group 3 to take forward. Since the closure of Contact Group 2's afternoon session yesterday, the Secretariat has continued to receive and has published many written submissions, including those which relate to provisions in Part 3 and Part 4 of the Annex to the Zero draft. We look forward to reflecting upon and discussing this expanded draft text with all members in further meetings of Contact Group 2. Thank you, Chair.
I thank the co-facilitators of Contact Group 2, Mr. Boashi, Ms. Lynch, for your report and for your, I thank you for your valuable work. Next, we will now hear a short progress report from the co-facilitators of Contact Group 3, Ms. Marine Collignon of France and Mr. Dani Ragdiansyah of Indonesia. Ms. Collignon and Mr. Ragdiansyah, you have the floor from the seat of Indonesia.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Contact Group 3 had 3 meetings between Tuesday afternoon and this morning. At these meetings, the group considered the elements addressed in the synthesis report on elements not discussed at INC-2. We were able to have a first consideration of all elements addressed in the synthesis report, building on the discussions in the preparatory meeting. On Part 1 preamble, with respect to the preamble of the agreement, the discussions confirmed that there is a generally shared view that it should be short and concise, reflect the history and context, and set the tone for the instrument. In this respect, while some members considered the synthesis report as a starting point for the development of the preamble, others considered that the elements reflected in the synthesis report sometimes overlap and they could benefit from some streamlining to make the text more concise. Several members indicated that the development of preambular language can build upon UNEA Resolution 5/14 as well as the Minamata Convention preamble. Several members mentioned that the preamble should include a date to end plastic pollution by 2040, while others oppose any reference to a date. We have also heard a view that the preamble may need to be finalized at a later stage of the process once the substantive provisions have been developed, and indeed that it may not need to go into a great level of detail as the nature of the actions to be taken under the instrument. Under B definition, there was interest in exploring the use of relevant existing definitions in multilateral instruments, including multilateral environment agreements or MEAs and trade or standards related instruments as a starting point, while noting the need to ensure the suitability of adopted definitions to the instrument. The possibility of conducting technical work was raised, in particular on specific terms related to plastic and plastic pollution of particular relevance to this instrument, while possible input from experts to support an understanding of terms that may be relied on in the instrument. At the same time, many members considered that discussion on definitions should come after discussion within the other contact groups. Although the list of terms identified in the synthesis report was identified as a good starting point, a number of members also identified specific terms not included in the list of terms identified for consideration in the synthesis and requested for more time to provide some inputs. Under C principles, our preliminary sense on the discussion so far is that there appears to be a shared understanding that a number of principles are relevant and important to the instrument. Many delegations referred to the same principles, including many of the Rio principles, as referred to in the resolutions. Much of the debate centers around how this should be incorporated in the instrument and whether a dedicated provision is needed for this purpose. Overall, the following three approaches, or a combination of them, have been suggested to reflect principles relevant to the instrument. Namely, references to relevant principles in preambular language, a dedicated provision identifying principles to guide the instrument, and/or incorporating and embedding the relevant principles in the different substantive provisions through which they are made operational. There was some discussion of the potential implication and merits or demerits of one or the other approach, including the possibility that a different approach may be appropriate depending on the nature of the principle at issue. Finally, it was emphasized that the final decision on references to principles should be taken once the provisions have been agreed upon. On scope, the discussion in the contact group confirmed that there is a shared understanding that UNEA Resolution 514 provides the basis for identifying the scope of the future instrument. We understand that there is also a shared understanding that this entails the long-term elimination of plastic pollution based on a comprehensive approach addressing the full life cycle of plastic. It also appears to us that there is a common understanding that all sources of plastic pollution would fall within this scope. Different views were expressed, however, on the need for a scope provision and what such provision might contain if included. Overall, three options seem to prevail. Number one, no specific scope provision being included in the instrument. Two, a short scope provision essentially reflecting the language contained in Resolution 514. Or three, a detailed scope provision addressing additional aspects, including with respect to what exactly might be covered as part of the full life cycle of plastic, or geographical and/or jurisdictional coverage. Differences of views arise specifically in relation to the possible contents of a detailed scope provision due to different perspectives on which specific aspects should or should not be the basis for substantive obligation under the instrument. As was noted by some delegation, this discussion revealed different interpretations of what the life cycle of plastic encompasses. For the rest of the report, I would like to invite my co-facilitator.
Thank you. So regarding part 2, institutional arrangement and final provision, on the governing body, there was a broad convergence on the establishment of a conference of parties, a COP, as main governing body for the instrument. There was also convergent views on the possibility of developing the relevant provision based on those under existing MEAs, including the Minamata Convention. It was also suggested that the potential function identified in paragraph 58 of the synthesis report could serve as a starting point. It was also noted that the final list of functions of the future COP would need to be confirmed later in the process in light of the substantive obligation to be agreed and should be clearly circumscribed. It was further suggested that the governing body should take decision by consensus with the possibility of voting only if all reasonable efforts to reach consensus have failed and should have the authority to adopt its own rules of procedure at its first meeting. On subsidiary bodies, there was a broad support for subsidiary bodies to be established with well-defined mandate, either in the instrument or as needed by the governing body. The need for such bodies to be inclusive, representative, and gender balanced was highlighted. It was also suggested in this respect that not all subsidiary bodies would need to be established immediately. it was also noted that the need for such bodies and their features would depend on the need of the instrument considering its substantive provision. Reference was made in particular to the following: a scientific and technical body, including for information sharing, the identification of chemicals to be included in the instrument, assessment and recommendation, a compliance and implementation committee, though the view was also expressed that matters related to compliance should be left to national jurisdiction, a clearinghouse mechanism for exchange of information, a financial mechanism, including to consider availability of resources, funding for developing countries and transfer of technology, a committee of means of implementation, and a committee to manage the financial mechanism, including to monitor financial flows from developing countries. On the Secretariat, there was a broad support for the establishment of a Secretariat. Some members were of the view that the text on Secretariat should be developed based on the Minamata Convention text. A group of members suggested that the Executive Director of UNEP shall, in the meantime, perform function of the Secretariat. Regarding Part 3 on final provision, some members were of the view that the text on final provision could be developed based on the text of existing MEAs, including the Stockholm or Minamata Convention, adapted to the context of the instrument. Others considered document INC-1/8 as a good basis for the development of the text. Some members highlighted concern on the proposed article on non-parties, the settlement of disputes. Others that they had submitted, indicated that they had submitted proposal including on the voting right. Many members supported the development of final provision at a later stage by a legal drafting group in line with usual practice. Finally, on the way forward, as we have mentioned to delegation in the contact group, as our sense as co-facilitator is that over these past days, from the preparatory meeting to now, we have made substantial progress in getting a much better understanding of each other's position, identifying areas of potential convergence, and articulating the range of options under consideration where views are not yet fully convergent. At the same time, we are very mindful of the fact that an important dimension of the work we have been conducting this week is to move us towards the full integration of the area we have discussed this week into the next iteration of the draft text of the instrument. And an important aspect of the mandate given to us is that any inputs received from members will be reflected in our outcome. In that respect, a very clear message that we've been hearing from members and that we endorse is that all inputs, whether in the form of draft text or another form, are of equal importance and need to be reflected in this outcome. So what we have proposed to the group, and we are grateful that they have entrusted us with that task, is that we can already identify what could be the basis for negotiation, including concrete text from some issue as a very first basis, or more conceptual element or options on others, where further work would be needed to be informed by the negotiation of the future provision currently being negotiated. We will be preparing this document for the group consideration. We are hoping to share it with delegations tonight if possible, or at the latest tomorrow morning for their consideration. In my conclusion, we also want to highlight that we aim to start the work on intersessional work across the areas covered under all three contact groups, building on the work conducted on this by contact group 1 and 2 in their respective area. We are planning to meet this evening for a first discussion on intersessional work. Je vous remercie, Monsieur le Président.
I thank the co-facilitators of group number 3, Ms. Collignon and Mr. Rajdiansia, for your progress report and valuable work. Colleagues, I would like also to express our thanks to all the participation you have had in these contact groups with our 6 co-facilitators. This update has been very useful as we continue our work in the contact groups for the remainder of this session. I also note that there have been different levels of discussion on specific elements in each contact group. As you know, the deadline for text proposals from delegation was 10 a.m. of today. In the interest of time and taking into consideration that over 300 submissions have been received, the co-facilitators are releasing sections of the zero draft reflecting the input from members as they are completed for deliberation during the second round of discussion. This will give members of the committee as much time as possible within our tight schedule. Over the past couple of days, we have heard views from delegates on many key different elements, and based on the report from the co-facilitators, it appears we are making good progress. I am confident that we are on the right track as we advance the development of the instrument. I appreciate that there is a strong appetite among delegates to move ahead to a second round of discussion as soon as possible. I would like to ask you to continue your work in the contact groups with the aim of concluding at the latest by noon on Saturday, 18 November. I would therefore suggest that contact groups 1 and contact group 3 resume their meetings this evening from 8 o'clock, and the three contact groups will continue their work also tomorrow starting at 10 a.m. During the plenary on Saturday, 18 November, the co-facilitators will present their summary reports and the revised versions of the zero draft. These summary reports will further be annexed to the final report of the session. At the plenary on Saturday, we will also discuss the way forward for our work, including possible mandates for a new iteration of the draft text, as well as intersessional work. Distinguished delegates, seeing that we still have some time, if you allow me, in our plenary today, I would like to open the floor now for statements from observers under this agenda item. I encourage observers to deliver joint statements on behalf of coalition, alliances, or groups. And I remind them that the time limits are of 2 minutes. So once again, please keep your intervention short and focus on the zero draft, where relevant, on any additional issues related to the summary report presented by the co-facilitators. I now see in my list IGO number 4, International Maritime Organization. You have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Distinguished delegates, the International Maritime Organization, the IMO, is the UN specialized agency responsible for developing and adopting measures to improve the safety and security of international shipping and to prevent marine and atmospheric pollution from ships. IMO is also the secretariat for the treaties that regulate the prevention of pollution from dumping of wastes and other matter at sea, the London Convention and London Protocol. Annex 5 of MARPOL, the International Convention for the Prevention of Pollution from Ships, is the global convention that contains requirements for the prevention of pollution by garbage from ships, including fishing vessels and floating platforms. Since the entry into force in 1988 of MARPOL Annex 5, disposal into the sea of all forms of plastics generated during normal ship operations has been prohibited. This prohibition extends to fishing gear disposal and line scraps generated by the repair or operation of fishing gear. In addition, the 1972 London Convention and the 1996 London Protocol set the global regulations to prevent pollution from dumping of wastes and other matter at sea, and the dumping of plastics into the sea is also prohibited. Notwithstanding these requirements, IMO has recognized that further action is needed and has adopted a strategy and action plan to address marine plastic litter from ships. Ongoing work under this plan includes measures to reduce the environmental risk of the transport of plastic pellets and the development of amendments to MARPOL Annex 5 to make mandatory the marking of fishing gear in cooperation with FAO. We're working within this plan, supported by our technical cooperation program and partners within the UN system and beyond, to ensure the implementation of these regulations is strengthened globally, and we remain ready to provide input, advice, and technical information as necessary. Thank you, Chair.
I thank the representative IMO. Before continuing with our list of observers, I will give the floor to Brazil. Brazil has the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and we definitely agree with you that I think we're advancing a lot in our work, so thank you very much for your commitment, and thank you to your staff and to the Secretariat as well. I just need to pass the floor to my colleague who will address Contact Group 2. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. And thank you very much, dear co-facilitators from Contact Group 2, for the inclusive way you both conducted the discussions in our group, and for the comprehensive summary of the discussions we held. The Brazilian delegation would just like to kindly request that the Contact Group 2 summary report refer to the preference expressed by some delegations to the establishment of a new financial mechanism to properly support this comprehensive instrument. Thank you very much.
I thank the representative of Brazil. I will now, duly noted, I now give the floor to IGO number 9. Argentina also has requested the floor. I will give the floor now to Argentina.
Muchas gracias, señor presidente.
Thank you so much, Chair. My delegation wishes to back what was just said by Brazil. Thank you. Thank you so much to the representative of Argentina.
Nigeria, United Kingdom.
I will give the floor now to Nigeria.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Nigeria would also like to support the proposal made by Brazil and Argentina on the need to reflect the preference expressed by most countries for establishment of a new dedicated external financing for this treaty. Thank you.
I thank Nigeria. We have taken note of your interventions and also our co-facilitators. I will now continue with a list of interventions from the observers. The next in our list was AGO number 9, the United Nations Industrial Development Organization. You have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. UNIDO welcomes the INC process and is already actively supporting its member states' goals in fighting plastic pollution through national, regional, and international action plans and interventions, contributing to reducing plastics pollution. UNIDO promotes circular economy practices along plastic value chains to reduce the generation of plastic waste. Circular economy for plastics requires an integrated and systematic approach where plastics are produced, used, and managed in a sustainable way throughout the value chain or their life cycle. Once produced sustainably, plastic products should be kept in use for as long as possible. UNIDO would like to emphasize the critical importance of initiating the transformation to a circular economy at the very first step, the design stage of the production of plastics. Designing products and processes for circularity helps eliminate hazardous substances and pollution, preserve the value over time, and optimize the use of resources. It is hence essential to prioritize the design stage to ensure that circularity is indeed embedded at every step of a plastic product's life cycle. With Design for Circularity at the core of its interventions, UNIDO is supporting Morocco, the Philippines, and South Africa within the integrated program on circular solutions to plastic pollutions funded by the Global Environment Facility. Similarly, and with funding from the government of Japan, UNIDO is working with the governments of Egypt and Nigeria on preventing plastic pollution. UNIDO is also working on strengthening the national capacity to promote circular economy in Ghana with JEF funding and on establishing a center of excellence for circular economy in the country thanks to funding from the government of Canada. In parallel, UNIDO is implementing an integrated approach towards sustainable plastics use and marine litter prevention in Bangladesh with funding from the government of Norway. Furthermore, UNIDO takes the opportunity to invite member states to join our common efforts to advocate for a global just circular economy transitions through the Global Alliance on Circular Economy and Resource Efficiency. UNIDO remains fully committed to supporting its member states in transitioning towards a circular economy and eliminating plastic pollution by closely working with all relevant stakeholders and hence directly contributing to the objective of this INC process. Thank you, Chair.
I thank you for your intervention. I now give the floor to representative of Saudi Arabia.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. First of all, I'd like to thank all colleagues for the excellent and huge effort has been done so far. Also, my delegation would like to state our reservation on creating a new financial mechanism or a new financial fund. We think that using an existing financial mechanism would be much smoother and faster to enable developing countries to fulfill their obligations in this instrument. Having something new will take a longer time and also will take even more time to test or evaluate the effectiveness of this new mechanism. Thank you very much. My colleague would like also to give another comment.
Thank you, Chair, and I appreciate the effort done by the co-chairs for contact group number 3 and their intention to summarize tonight and put in all this effort to come up with the report and recommendation for contact group number 3. However, if the report is going to be delayed for early morning or late at night, we would ask for a little bit more time tomorrow morning so we can go through the report and digest the findings and summaries to have more productive participation when we conduct the group again. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Duly noted. I remind that tonight the discussion is on intersessional work. I will now give the floor to representative of Costa Rica. Costa Rica tiene la palabra.
Muchas gracias, señor presidente.
Thank you. Thank you so much, sir.
By thanking the co-facilitators for the hard work that they have done during the day today. I just wanted to briefly refer to the mention made by some member states with regards to the new financial mechanism, and in that regard, we would like to also echo the words by the delegate from Saudi Arabia in the sense that we would prefer to have a new financial mechanism, but within an existing financial institution. We have repeated it many times, but I would just like to make sure that it's there on record. Thank you very much.
I thank you. We have duly noted these proposals or opinions from delegations, and I think those are the interventions I think we need to continue doing at the contact groups that will resume shortly after this plenary. I have a request from the floor from Cameroon. Cameroon has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for giving me the floor. My delegation support the proposal made by Brazil with regard to the financial mechanism. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I would like to ask again the delegates if we can present these views that we have heard several regarding the specific points of the discussion we are having contact group 2. I remind that we are resuming shortly so we can present these specific views on specific issues shortly in the contact groups. Considering time, I would like to continue with the list of observers. The next in our list is IGO number 34, South Asia Cooperative Environmental Programs, SACEP.
Esteemed, my gratitude for the opportunity to address this esteemed forum on behalf of the South Asia Cooperative Environment Program, SACEP, representing 8 member states in South Asia: Afghanistan, Bangladesh, Bhutan, India, Maldives, Nepal, Pakistan, and Sri Lanka. As a committed intergovernmental organization dedicated to tackling the environmental issues in the South Asia region, SACEP recognizes the imperative of a focused and robust legal binding instrument to effectively combat transboundary plastic pollution and mitigate its associated impacts. Given the economic landscape of the South Asia region, which predominantly consists of developing economies, it is essential to underscore that the successful operationalization of such a legal instrument hinges upon securing a well-planned institutional arrangement. Since organizations such as SACEP has regional experience in combating transboundary movement of plastic pollution through various regional projects, it is suggested to incorporate regional IGOs into implementing mechanisms to enabling instruments. Under the Plastic Free Rivers and Seas for South Asia project, SACEP is at the forefront of developing policies and strategies related to the plastic pollution in the region. The project aims to facilitate regional engagement from both the public and private sectors, with crucial financial backing from international funding agencies. SACEP recognizes the necessity of aligning the legal binding instrument with regional policies to effectively combat the global impact of pollution, and will extend the full support to the member states in the upcoming years. I thank you, Mr. Chair.
I thank SACEP for his intervention. I now give the floor to the UN Office for Disaster Risk Reduction.
Thank you, Chair. The UN Office for Disaster Risk Reduction commends delegations for the progress made so far during INC-3. The increase of disaster risk is one of the various deleterious effects of plastic pollution. Plastic pollution is already putting more than 200 million people at increased risk of flooding and reducing ecosystems' resilience. At the same time, disasters are increasing plastic pollution, particularly by damaging waste management infrastructure that lack resilience. Applying a disaster risk reduction lens in alignment with the Sendai framework for disaster risk reduction is crucial for the success of the future instrument. Our concrete recommendations for the instrument are: on waste management, to commit to resilient waste management and recycling infrastructure and systems which can withstand natural and man-made hazards. On the removal of existing plastic pollution, to explicitly focus on accumulation zones where litter is increasing disaster risk and poses a threat to ecosystem resilience. On capacity building and technical assistance, to include a focus on the associated risks of plastic pollution, including risk management and reduction options. On awareness raising, education, and research, to expand the scope so it is not only focusing on the risks to health, but also to well-being and the environment. UNDRR remains at Member States' disposal to support further consideration of these elements during consultations at INC-3 and beyond. I thank you.
I thank UNDRR for her intervention. I now give the floor to the international NGO 6, number 6, International Organization for Standardization.
Mr. Chair, Excellencies, distinguished delegates and colleagues, the International Organization for Standardization is honored to be an observer organization in the INC process and to have an opportunity to give this statement and share our perspective. ISO is an impartial, not-for-profit, non-governmental organization dedicated to the development of international standards. ISO standards are widely used by public and private sectors and referenced in regulations. ISO operates through a transparent consensus-based process that includes diverse stakeholders, including representation from developing countries. As a neutral, multi-stakeholder platform, we are open to support the ongoing work in this process. We would like to highlight a few areas where ISO standards can support the development of an international legally binding instrument and help its effective implementation. ISO standards contain latest technical information and expertise. Notably, ISO has several standards that cover environmental labels, symbols, abbreviations, and material identification. These standards can help specify and clarify provisions regarding material composition, design, and performance of products globally. They can increase transparency of global trade, ensure the reliable verification of environmental claims, and streamline certification processes, potentially integrating with the future compliance mechanism under the future instrument. ISO standards also contain technical expert verified vocabulary on various topics related to plastic production, use and waste management such as life cycle, mechanical recycling, reuse, eco-design, microplastic, waste treatment, biological recycling, among others. Using these globally agreed terms and definitions in the future instrument would help avoiding ambiguity. ISO standards, including vocabulary ones, are regularly revised and updated, allowing to adapt to new scientific and industry developments. After the future instrument is finalized, ISO standards can contribute to its effective implementation. Reliance on ISO standards can foster harmonization of national approaches, making sure that the progress towards our shared goal is tracked in a comparable and transparent way. ISO standards on conformity assessment can also facilitate the implementation as they help ensuring regulatory compliance, monitoring adherence to norm, and bolstering oversight mechanisms.
We need to wrap up, please.
Yeah. ISO stands ready to contribute to the ongoing commendable efforts to address plastic pollution. Thank you for your attention.
I thank the International Organization for Standardization. Our last intervention from observers will be NGO number 22, Break Free from Plastic Youth.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I am Taylor Reddy from Zero Waste Durban, South Africa, on behalf of Break Free from Plastic Youth. As African youth, we are tired of our continent being seen as an extractive haven for natural resources and a dumping ground for unwanted waste. The legacy of colonialism is still perpetuated by countries in the global north through waste dumping and dirty technology transfer, reinforcing and deepening centuries of oppression on the people of the global south. We as people, especially in Africa, know what it means to live through struggle. We know what it is like to have powers in the global north oppress and exploit our people and dictate our laws and practices. But we also know what it is like to rise up and resist our oppressors. We know resilience and strength and unity and solidarity. We need to break free from the system that prioritizes single-use plastics in the name of convenience and development over the health, safety, and ecological boundaries of the planet. This crisis can't be solved by the same techno-fixes that have been the dominating policy narratives and have proven itself unscalable and ineffective. We need to address the problem at source. If we continue business as usual, the current surge in plastic production will continue, and this will drown out other real solutions that need to be focused on in the treaty. The solution is to drastically reduce plastic production now, in line with what is required to keep within our planetary boundaries. We need you to govern and rise up to the occasion for the interest of your people, of our people. It is your mandate to respect our human rights. It is your mandate to protect the interests of the common people, not corporate interests, not the 1% that benefit from the production of plastics and the extraction of fossil fuel. We need ambitious targets to ensure reduction in plastic production now. Thank you.
I thank the representative of Break Free from Plastic Youth, and I would like to thank observers for their informative interventions. With this, the committee has concluded this stage of its consideration of Agenda Item 4. So before I close this plenary meeting, I would like to give the floor to the Secretariat for an announcement. Secretariat, you have the floor.
Thank you so much. So Contact Group 1 will meet tonight at 8 p.m. in Conference Room 2. Contact Group 2 will meet tomorrow at 10 a.m. in Conference Room 2. Contact Group 3 will meet tonight at 8 p.m. in Conference Room 1. Delegates are kindly invited to check the schedule for latest information. We also wish to remind delegates that the government of Switzerland is organizing a Swiss break, a reception that will be held this evening from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. at the space located opposite the Kalibuni sign at the main entrance. Delegates are kindly informed that the VIP lounge opposite the main cafeteria is available for delegations to have small informal meetings. However, please take note that no food or drinks is allowed in the space. Finally, we would like to remind delegates to please not leave your belongings unattended in the conference rooms and refrain from reserving seats, as UN security may remove your belongings. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Secretariat. Thank you, Secretariat. This now brings us to the conclusion of our meeting. Our next plenary meeting is scheduled for Saturday at 3 p.m. This meeting is now closed.